It's time for another bit of guidance in Excel. Today we're going to convert a string of date text into an Excel date number and do some graphing with it. So it can be tricky sometimes. You get data that doesn't have the date or time properly formatted to use it as a date or time. There may be several ways to attack this, but this is one of them. What we want to do is open data and then convert the data into a usable format that we can do some time graphing with. Fortunately, Excel has a way to deal with time numbers, not always the most straightforward way, and it may be that I'm reflecting a little bit of my ignorance on properly using Excel for tackling this task. But I think we can get the job done, and if you explore other ways or other means to make this happen, that would be worthwhile to share with me. I'd like to hear about it. Let's take a look. What I have here are 4 CSV files that I've downloaded from a data logger. This particular data logger is sitting in a water well. It measures parameters on 4 different channels, 3 of which are of interest to us. And for demonstration purposes today, I'm going to open up channel 1. Channel 1 is a data file of the depth to the water height. Really doesn't matter what we're measuring here. We're just interested in seeing if we can make the data conform to a timestamp and then use that timestamp to understand what's going on. So let's go ahead and open this file. I have CSVs, so they open automatically in Excel. A CSV is a comma-separated variable file, meaning that it's a text file with each of the data separated by commas. Another way you could open this is just to open it into Excel and explain that you have comma-separated variables. CSVs are very common. They're a useful format. But what we have here may not be quite as useful. So my sheet loaded in here is 3 columns. It is a date, and it's written in the European convention, which is day first, month second, year third. It is nicely fully written out. And then a time of day. Our sampling interval on this data logger was 1 hour each. So every day I'm getting 24 different readings, starting with 0 for midnight and proceeding all the way to the 23rd hour of the day, or 11 p.m. And then using a transducer, it's measuring the water column. And the water column has been previously calibrated so that it knows where the water level is. And it's reporting on this day, which is October 7th, 2021 at 1 in the morning. The water level was 12.6, and that's in inches. What I wanted to be able to do with this is to take apart the date and the time and construct a single date time number that helps us out. For one thing, let's just take a look at what it's done here. Conveniently, this is actually a time value. If I go to custom, this box here that's telling me the format, and I look at more number formats, it actually is telling me it's already formatted in hours, minutes. Let's see what happens when we change that to general on this first cell. And it reports a number that may not make any sense to us. This is an incremental number that Excel uses to keep track of time. So once upon a time, I probably knew how to derive these numbers, but I basically take them at face value at this point. And that's the appropriate number for 1 in the morning. And then we could do that again for 2 in the morning, and you can see that the number is incremented appropriately, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to undo those last two steps and just leave them in the time format. Now, it would have been nice if the date were in the date format, but no, the date is just a string of characters as far as Excel is concerned, and that's not particularly useful to us. If I wanted to graph this, the best I could probably do is just do some kind of series line graph with it, because they are incremental. They will step in incrementally. But I don't want to lose track of this time data even when I'm graphing it. It would be nice if my time data were all in one place as one number. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, let's begin. What I'm going to start with is by giving myself some room between the date entry and the hour stamp right here. And I guess actually before that, I might put a heading in front of this. So I'm going to insert a row into one, so everything is dropped down by one. So let's go ahead and do that. I like to right click on the place where I'm going to insert and just drop that in. And then I'm going to be able to put headings on this, like this will be depth. And that means depth to the water surface. I guess actually it'd be nice to indicate that it's in feet, so I'm going to do that. But as I started to say, we're going to add a couple of columns in here, give ourselves some room. I'm going to want to end up with 3 columns before the time, so I am going to add another 2 columns, B and C. I've got them both selected. I'm going to hit right-click, insert again, and now I've got 3 columns going across here. And then I'm going to tear apart this 3-digit entry that's separated by the periods. We're just going to pretend that the periods are actually dividing or separating the values. So in other words, this little fragment of data would be a period or a point separated value. We're going to go up to data on the main menu up here. And then we're going to tell it we want to do text to columns right here. Text to columns. We can split a single column into multiple columns. I'm just going to do it for A2 to start off with to show you how it works. So I'm going to go to A2. I click on text to columns. It's going to want to know how it knows when to separate things out. You can do this one of 2 ways. You can tell it there's some way it's delimited or identified as a column break, or you could just arbitrarily give it a fixed width. That wouldn't work too well for us. We have periods between each of our entries. We're going to do that. And then it doesn't give me an option for this being a separator. So I'm going to go other and type in a single period there. And you can see what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. We're going to have a column for the day, a column for the month, and a column for the year. And there we go. And just to keep track of what I'm doing here, this is day, month, and year. And while we're at it, we'll just say hour over here. All right, so naturally, I just don't want to do this once. I want to do this for the entire length of the data. So pro tip here, again, if you've seen stuff from me before, you know that it's pretty easy to navigate and select columns by keeping the shift key down and selecting data. And I've got quite a bit of data here, not a horrendous amount, but I'd like to actually just skip down to the end. The way you can get to the end of data very quickly is by doing Control and then End on your keyboard. And Control on End on your keyboard sends you to the very last entry in the sheet. So that sent me down. It's actually a null value because we pulled the data before it finished for the day. And apparently the device actually is already populating the entire day out in terms of its timestamps. All right, I want to go back up to the top and this time select it. So that's Control Home, which will get me to the top. Okay, now I'm going to go to the first cell I want to do this to, which is going to be our A3 cell. And I'm going to hit Control, Shift, and End. And that's going to select everything down to the end of the data. That's got everything from our first cell on down to the very bottom of the data set. While holding Shift, I'm going to use the left arrow key and move us back to column A. So this is only 1,321. That's really tiny. I don't usually do this for such small sets, but we do work with bigger sets, so this could come in handy for that. Now what I want to do is that same trick. I want to come up here to text to columns and tell it I want to delimit it, and I want to delimit it by period. It remembers what I did last, so that's nice. I'm just going to tell it to finish it this time. Now every column is in day, month, year, and hour. I've separated it all out nicely. Now I want to bring it back together. So there's a couple of commands we're going to use for this. I'm going to go over to column F here and expand it a little bit so we have room to pull off what we're doing here. The first thing is we're going to type in equals date. And what we could do with the date command is actually tell it that we want to use the year, the month, and the day to produce a date value. Now that will be a number to Excel, but it can also be something we can format into a lovely looking date, and it's something we can graph as a date. So again, it wanted year, so parentheses year, comma, month, comma, day. That's kind of nice to just go backwards from C to B to A, and I select all of those. Look what I have here, 10, 7, 21 in a format that's pretty familiar to us. We go to home and tell it I want to see it as a number. So general, that's the number Excel uses for October 7th, 2021. Specifically October 7th, 2021 at midnight. And what that means is we can add the hour number to it and suddenly end up with time for the hour. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. In addition to equals date, parentheses C2, comma B2, comma A2 for this 2 row, I'm going to then use the plus sign and tell it to add D2 to this mess, and it's going to increment it. Now it says 1 o'clock because it automatically just went to the hour. Let's go back to the general representation. What it's done is it's appended our day by a fraction of the day in Excel numbers. And of course we can turn this into a date and time like we like to see, I think. In the end, I'm going to go to more number formats here and look at my options under date and scroll down a little bit. I think there's a date option with a clock. I don't know if you have a preference between AM and PM or the 24-hour clock. I have a strong preference towards the 24-hour clock because I find AM and PM somewhat confusing, or at least able to confuse things enough. So now I have a nice looking number. What it's done is it's got my date out in front and the time of day there, and let's just extend that down to the next one. Beauty. So there's 2 in the morning there. And we're going to go down, and what I'm doing now is I'm hitting Control Shift End and going to the end of this and going to paste in the same process all the way through. And each one of these is taking the date and it's adding the time to it. Okay, let's go ahead and name this time. It looks pretty nice. Now I want to explore graphing this data. I think I really want my depth information to the right side of time. I'll make the graphing easier. It's a little more elegant looking. That's what we really have. Time's going to be on the x-axis. It's the ultimate independent variable. And that will put depth on the y-axis automatically. So what I'm going to do is select column E. I'm going to go ahead and cut it, and then I'm going to come over to column G, and I'm going to go ahead and paste it there. So now depth is on the right side of time. We could have worked around it, but that makes it nicer. Now I'm going to actually graph the data, so I'm going to go to column F, row number 1. We're where I've got labeled time, and I'm going to do that trick again with Shift Control N, take us down to the bottom. I'm going to leave the Shift down, and I'm going to use the up arrow to get me out of these non-numbered values. They might cause some problems with my graph. And then I'm going to scroll back up to the top because I don't really want my graph at the bottom, and tell it that I want to insert a scatter plot. Let's use points plus lines. They'll look good. And there we go. That's a nice looking thing, a little squishy down here, but we can expand things out. Of course, reformatting is not a big deal. We can do lots of that. One thing to be aware of is I can now look at certain subsets of this if I wanted to, but you do have to be able to read the Excel date. So if we format the axis and ask it like we want to start at a certain range and end at a certain range, well, we're going to have to know the numbers that correspond with the dates that we want to use. So I'm just guessing here, but let's do 490, for example. Now I can have a different start date on this, but I need to know what 4490 actually is. So you'd want to go over to Excel and I think it was 44490, and then ask it to translate that into a date. Short date's fine. And that turns out to be October 21st, 2021. Again, I think at one time I could read the numbers a little more fluently, but I can't do that anymore. All right, we got what we wanted, a very elegant looking graph that's now in time. This is not a line graph, this is a time graph. This is the way good time data should look like when we're done, and now we can see the water levels as they're experienced on a certain date, and you can do all the fun graph things that you want to do with it. Of course, one big problem now, probably should have done this even sooner in the process, is we still has this as a CSV file. That is not how we're going to save it because we want to keep all of the wizardry we've done to this. So I need to make sure I go back and save as, and then tell it wherever I'm going to save the data, and convert this into an XLSX file so that it actually keeps the graph and some of the other things that we did. There you go.